So let me ask you this question. Listening to Rob, what I heard Rob say is, hey, it's not just fit, stretch matters too. So in your experience, how have millennials stretched the companies that you've built and led, Michelle?
It's really the questions that they're asking. And some of it has been around expectation setting. And again, I want to be very careful about being too stereotypical here, but the pace at which they would like feedback, for instance, is it has antiquated the concept of the annual review, right? So an organization's goal is to create a feedback-rich environment. What I have found in my experience is that millennials are wanting to know sooner, faster, how they're doing in these more digestible chunks of activities that they do and they partake in. They want feedback pretty quickly. That has changed, to me, an aspect of the culture, right? Because it's no longer this, you're going to wait till the end of the year, you have a review, maybe there's a comp reset. It is happening all along the way, right? And that really requires, more importantly than ever, I feel like this trust-based relationship between manager and employee, so that there is a sense of we can have these conversations, and then the employee can react and adjust and evolve along the way. And my sense is, at least in my experience, that has been exceptionally well done with this generation, is that they're able to adapt and evolve and move faster.
Do you find that as well, Rob? If I can be mischievous,
Oh,
what does
Huggy.
feedback?
Oh, Huggy.
What does feedback mean? I see them texting all the time. Is that like an example of feedback, or are they seeking approval?
All the above.
So yes, all the above. But I think it's also, again, going back to putting yourself in their shoes. These are the ways of communicating that this generation does, and so I think part of the understanding is what are the tools? How do they entertain themselves? How do they expect to communicate with each other? How do they expect to communicate with a company? And I think, as a manager, it's a great learning opportunity for you to learn from the younger generation. Did people in our generation, when Slack came out and the younger generation was doing it, did you go and learn Slack? Were you curious as to what it was and why? Why was it taking off? And so I think that there's a way that, by the way, you can allow the millennial also to be the teacher, or the Gen X to be the teacher for all of us. And every generation is different. You made the point that, contextually, as generations, we all have our perspectives. Well, do you understand this generation's perspective? And by the way, there's going to be a generation after them that's going to have their own perspective. We have a choice as managers and leaders, whether we want to become stale, whether we want to become constrained, or whether we want to molt our skin as well. And in a world of constant feedback and of constant change, I think it's going to be incumbent on us to adopt some of the behaviors and attitudes that we see in the younger generation, because it's going to be necessary for the next several decades.
So, as you're, and I love your example of feedback, Michelle. As I was listening to you, the question I was having in my mind is, do millennials want feedback, or do they want feed forward? Is there a difference between the two?
Fair question. My observation has been that millennials want feedback on what they're good at. And back in the day, there was a sense of being a well-rounded player, and that you took where your weaknesses or vulnerabilities are and you were trying to shore them up. My sense and my observations, again, has been that this group is more about, what do I do well? And that is going to become part of my brand. Because this digital native generation is developing their own personal brand, and we all did it. We had resumes, but now everything's online, and you are creating your product, which is yourself, online. And it is wanting to say, okay, I don't do big data. That's not what I know, or I'm not good at this. This is what I do, and creating that image and that product of yourself that is online, and at all times expanding upon that and building on it and intensifying it to some degree. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. So, but as I listen to you, the impression I sort of got, and this is entirely my impression, are you suggesting that millennials are specialists who choose opportunities where their strengths match the opportunity, and that they're not generalists? What do you think, Rob?
Well, I think that they might focus for a period of time, but I think the role of a good manager is to try to lay out for the people who report to you that whatever they're doing now will be obsolete and dated within a finite amount of time. So they're also going to need to be developing their skill set and their tool base. And as they start to see their role, as they kind of mature in an organization and take things on, they will need to unlearn all they have learned and learn new things as well. So it's perfectly okay for somebody to double down on something for a period of time, but our job as managers and leaders is to coach them to saying, don't get locked in. Don't become constrained.
There's value in expanding and stretching.
And how do you constantly, you don't want to be flighty, get great at something, but understand that that greatness, there will be some moment in time where you will need to reinvent yourself again.
But isn't there an incentive problem? Both of you have enormous compassion, empathy, if you will, for the millennial generation. I'm going to put myself in the position of a manager and say, my God, here are these people who are told they can do whatever they want, express yourself, be an activist, develop them. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're only going to be in my company for 3 years. They're not going to be there for a long time. Why should I put all this effort to do that?
It's a good question, Huggy. Because they're people. And the millennial generation is a large cadre of the workforce right now. And to Rob's point, you've got to meet them where they're at. We cannot become stale and antiquated in terms of not understanding what their contextual journey has been and why maybe they have the mindset that they do. We have to figure out how to work with them. So I'm not saying it's not frustrating, but you will, there's more, if you can't engage your employees of any generation, you risk the growth of a high performance organization. So this is just the math that has to happen.